Hello, everybody. Welcome back into the Off Angle. We're here with another episode, of course. You may notice there are only 2 cameras on for today. It's been a bit of a slow week. We have some guests sort of, tacitly lined up or whatever in conversation with, but we couldn't really get them on soon enough to get another episode out to keep that consistency going for everybody who watches. At home, of course, we are here just after the Blast, like right after the Blast Fall final. Heroic have just taken the dub ski. It's the 27th of November, right? Just to make sure that we're all on that same page, Darian. But yes, we are gonna come in with, I suppose, one of those infamous filler episodes that they talk about from time to time. It's also been a bit of a slow week news-wise, to be honest. So everyone's busy, but also the calendar's not so busy. So I think that most of the chat here is going to be centered around that fall final and the state of some of the teams, where they're at. And again, might even save some of those for some of the guests that we've got lined up coming on a little bit further down the line. But nonetheless, a fun day all around and not a bad little final there, I suppose.
Yeah, honestly, Blast, there's a couple of threads on the subreddit for people who are hardcore fans, which I figure if you're watching this, you probably are. You may have seen all of the Blast love. Everybody saying, hey, ESL, take notes. This is how you run a broadcast. And that does happen pretty much every time we go from an ESL event to a Blast event, which maybe the trend is all that you need to know about as far as who's doing what better and stuff. But I will say that their show match was actually proper banter and proper content, like compared to what we got in the Rio one, obviously. But even if we just think about again, at this point, now that the Blast Major is announced, right, every product they put out is kind of like an advertisement or a promise.
Sure.
It's like, it will at least be this good. It will actually be better. They're saying, I think that they actually did do what the Rio guys did, but a different adjective where they said it's like the blank major of all time. And like in Rio's case, it was supposed to be the biggest, and then they cut that out from the first couple playoff games because obviously the crowd was not there. And then now Blaster saying they just want the best, or maybe it was the best produced, but I think it was just the best major. That's what they were saying. They want to make the best major ever. And so when that's the expectation that they're building, every event from in between needs to really sell that. And thankfully in this event, we got some pretty good games. Even that final was good. But like I was talking about the show match, it's like, if we can get stuff on that level, if we can get them to even innovate on that level, maybe we'll see a show match for the World Finals coming up in Abu Dhabi before the end of the month, rather the year. Yeah, we might be able to see some more stuff there. Who knows, right? It's hard to say, but as far as this event goes, I think they can pat themselves on the backs and say, job well done. And also, hey, it came home, right? The home team won the event. So for the first time in a while, right? So there's a lot of storylines and also a lot of I would say good things to come away from this event as a viewer, as an enthusiast of the game and of the esport. It's like when you watch that and you see the production that's there, you can be fairly confident that we should be in good hands come the major in Paris. So that's going to be really nice, especially if they are able to confirm, English speaking casting, English speaking audience in the arena, because that is actually a huge thing, right? What you don't remember a lot of the times is at least coming from the Rio event, I actually kind of forgot what it was like when the commentators were speaking to the crowd, which is weird because obviously I've seen way more events where that's actually happening. But when you come to this event, the commentators are speaking to the crowd. We get Scrawny and Launders, obviously Anders as well, giving his shout outs with Moses and stuff. It's you get that vibe where they are actually talking to the crowd directly and they're directly addressing them. And I think that's really cool. It's something that unfortunately just didn't happen for the Rio event, obviously, barring that one little outtake with Machine and Sponge in the final. And that's that is what it is, right? But it doesn't feel like a major or even a really proper tier 1 LAN if the commentators aren't able to have that crowd play. It doesn't feel like it's the complete experience. And you might forget that was even part of the package if you only watch the Rio major. And then but then you tune into this event and you're like, oh wow, that's actually really cool. So it's probably a subtle element for a lot of people, but I feel like it's worth noting. And I think that this event really did go well, even though there was only really if you don't count the show match, right? There's only 3 best of 3s even played on the stage, which maybe is a little underwhelming in terms of just raw length of the event. But I'm pretty happy with the games that we did get, at least.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I think that there's this sort of tie-in where maybe Blast have got to have the best looking broadcast and product, because that's what allows them to sort of stand out and be like, we are actually a top TO, whereas ESL have got more the format, the schedule, the logistics side of things down, where it's we're a top TO because we're everywhere and because we run the most events. But I will say it is interesting how it's like, yeah, the production looks great. And the Royal Arena, this whole like rising stage thing from the floor, the fucking music, the pyrotechnics and everything that marry up on the walk-ins, I guess, but they're obviously not walking in, they're like coming up. I don't know what, you would change it to.
Cover-ups.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, and all that looks brilliant. Looks really, really good. And is definitely something that, yeah, where it's like, okay, well, we might get this. And I think we'll see, mate. They might, peak too early. They might do the World Finals, and it's fucking incredible out in Abu Dhabi with all the resources that they might have out there as well. And then, unfortunately, they go to Paris and there's not as much available. So we might have a universe where that happens, perhaps. But the other side of things that immediately just sort of stands out, we can talk about final, we can talk about how good that looks. The one thing for me is that the whole format just feels a bit weird, of the blast circuit. That's something that they still kind of need to work out. I guess they do have a little bit of like Pro League affecting it, but the World Finals, right? It looks like we've got all the teams for that.
Yes.
Outsiders,
it was confirmed after NIP didn't make it to the final. They would have had to win this event to qualify. So when they fell to Faze, it was confirmed the whole way through. And obviously there's like one really, really big outlier in this team list that doesn't make any sense. But go ahead and read off.
Yeah, sure. Here. So we've got outsiders who get there because they won the Rio Major, which that's kind of cool because that's a team that's not in the blast circuit. And I think we're still under sanction type vibes where they're not even really getting a qualifier to get involved.
Yeah, which is really weird. Like, I don't even think ESL's done that as far as I know, right? So,
yeah, it feels like maybe something that they want to redact but can't for contract reasons. Or, well, I don't even know. I think that the optics are starting to change a little bit. It's a whole thing. The less politics, the better, maybe. But it definitely is kind of strange to see the way that outsiders making that. But it is also cool that it's like they've not gone and put their foot down and gone like, well, you might have won the Rio Major, but we still need to, down with the regime or whatever. I don't know. But anyway, so they make it because of the Rio Major. Heroic have made it because of their blast ranking. I would imagine also winning this event would help that, but it says blast ranking on HLTV. Na'Vi have made it because of the spring final, but then they played in this tournament, so it's things like that that feel a little strange. Vitality won because they got season 16 of Pro League, Faze, season 15 of Pro League, Liquid, G2, and OG, all there off their rankings. And I think, for me, I would say as well, maybe World Final, and it's got to encompass the entire year. I know the obvious one that you're getting at and that stands out there is OG, but also maybe G2, given their past 6 months and the form that they've, not displayed, I suppose. Also, maybe should they be here? But then again, it is a whole year encompassing event, is what it's supposed to be. I don't know that we necessarily have the 8 best teams, but we've definitely got like 5 or 6 of the best teams of the year for sure.
Yeah, the biggest outlier is definitely OG, right? Like, you don't expect that particular team to be doing crazy numbers at this event, and they didn't even really do much at the fall finals, which we just ended. So it's like probably the most underwhelming part of the World Championship, the Blast World Finals, is it's almost like a repeat, but like you just swap out one actor. You know what I mean? Like, we don't have NIP and we don't have Fluxo, but we have. We have Vitality and we have Outsiders. Those are the 2 swaps that we got, right? If you want to, swap the 2 of them. And that is very strange, right? So like, okay, Heroic qualify because of this event. If it was all done through event qualifications, well, obviously Faze won most of the events, right? So like you can't even really say that would have given you that much. So I understand why they need a leaderboard. I definitely feel like they've, there's the phrase "blown your load." I feel like they've done that with this event. You know what I mean? Like, they've already done most of these teams, and now we have like a repeat, but with a few missing, and it's like, or like a few swapped out. Outsiders being there, it'll be a really good test for them. Obviously, Heroic winning this event is like a fly in the ointment for the argument that the last major was a complete fluke. I still believe that. Like, I don't think Heroic would have made it as deep if they had faced Na'Vi, or if they had faced, maybe a FaZe clan that was actually playing, or, but maybe they wouldn't have even faced a Cloud9 down if they had met them in quarterfinals or semis or whatever. But like, outsiders dispatching them the way that they did meant Heroic looked super fragile, super fraudulent. And now we don't have that, right? Now we have them cementing that, okay, they are in the conversation. This is, against a FaZe that looked like they were going to be really hard to put away. I was expecting them to take it when it was 14-14 on Mirage, map 3. Even Inferno looked a bit ropey, but it was at the end of the day, like, cemented. So, like, yeah, this event looked primed for FaZe to come back and shake off the dust and say, like, I'm not buried yet. Rio is bad, but it wasn't that bad. Like, we can still play this game. And yeah, to be fair, they managed to make it almost all the way through, right? So at the very least, that's promising for them in the World Finals and for the future, is that they've maybe they have to prove it to themselves. I think this is like a narrative coming out of some of the interviews, that they just had to remember who they were. Maybe it was Twist who said that in one of the interviews during some of the Blast games. And yeah, the fact that they get back to a crowd, so soon after the Rio defeat, and like the absolute, embarrassment that it was to go 0-3. It's not actually foreign territory even for Kerrigan and FaZe, unfortunately, if you remember back a little bit farther back. But like, it definitely is never a place you want to be, especially coming in as such heavy potential favorites. Like, certainly, I wouldn't even say dark horse. Like, they were one of the tournament favorites coming into that event. And, they sort of laid some of their doubters to rest by going 3-0, despite all of the overtimes and close matches and stuff in the RMR, and then they go in and it's such a disappointment. Well, this is a nice little breath of fresh air, you can say, as a FaZe fan or as a Counter-Strike fan even. Like, okay, Kerrigan and the boys can still do it at the top level. And I think they dispatched teams that were more impressive at this event than Heroic, even dispatching Heroic themselves earlier in the tournament. So this is just nice. We get to the nice little wholesome moment of KD winning, finally Heroic winning. And as a result, we get to see what, like, maybe this is just a flash in the pan, or maybe they can string together more back-to-back grand finals, right? Who knows? But for me, I would say FaZe are probably still primed to take the fall final or the world finals. That being said, it gets a lot more interesting with this result, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, as you're kind of alluding to, again, that format creeps in a little bit, where it's like, they're playing Heroic twice or whatever. I guess that maybe does happen, but it seems like for a smaller tournament, maybe it should be a bit more savage. But yeah, I mean, to sort of reflect on FaZe a little bit, I will say that IM Rio was like a bad tournament from these guys, right?
Yes.
Whereas here we've had, like, come on, it's a pretty healthy second. They've not gotten mega lucky with, a favorite being knocked out by an underdog and then they get to face the underdog and all this sort of stuff. Like, maybe you can say a little bit that's what happens with Nip and Na'Vi, but ultimately, I think it's a good tournament from them, and then it's a good final. They win their own map picks, right? And then they have an overtime finish that is literally, it's like, that's when you're looking down to a game of inches. You've won the map that you're expected to win, but unfortunately, when it comes to the clutch, and, FaZe big clutch team, all this stuff, but they've just gotten unlucky. They've gotten on the other side of it. In a final like this, and you can say, well, top level players, all that, sure, but on a very sort of basic level, let's say, it's not FaZe playing bad. That's not why they've lost the final. Yeah. Right. It is that extra couple percent that Heroic seem to have at the moment, maybe backed by the fact that they're playing in front of a home crowd, for each and every member, etc., etc. So we'll see here what happens at the final, but I think that we're primed into a nice position for the Blast circuit. Yeah, I mean, some of the teams at Rio, but I don't know, man. I don't know, like, what the deal is over there. Too much pressure, crowd effect. I think it was definitely overplayed, but it might have affected them a little bit, or maybe, we've talked endlessly about the major and its format and all that sort of stuff. You can look into there being a few too many teams, a few too many games, and when you are big dog, everyone's after you, but it's difficult for you to prepare for everybody, So, yeah, and it's kind of like, if you prepare for FaZe and you really learn their style, you can probably beat a lesser team based on the knowledge that you've gained from a team like FaZe and whatnot. So, I definitely always think that majors like that are weird, and there's got to be a reason for it. But there's also got to be a big reason for the fact that so many teams underperform, not just a phase, right? And then when we come back into things, yeah, I think that's certainly an area in which phase will probably see this version of them look pretty good at, is bouncing back, because I think they have that wonderful mix of, like, you know, young and hungry, but also experienced, and they've also proven where their ceiling can go to as a 5-man squad. They've not had any changes since winning the major, so they can probably say to themselves that it's like, look, man, it's a bad week at the office. It comes at the wrong time, but that doesn't mean that we're a done deal. Whereas this Na'Vi roster, for example, I'm starting to think maybe in its current form, it is a done deal, and I think they're also thinking that, you know.
Clearly.
I don't know if you want to move on to that now, or if we want to spend some more time on phase, or.
Well, there's a few things we can say just about the teams that are going to be showing up at the World Final, and obviously one of them that wasn't here is Vitality, and they also had a very disappointing IEM Rio, almost getting kicked out by OG, funnily enough, in the the challenger stage, then barely scraping by again. Well, not so. I guess it was a confident win against FaZe in the best of one on Inferno, but beyond that, ENCE gets them out in the 1 and 2 game. Like, that's wild. You wouldn't expect that. And then, of course, ENCE themselves, the story of the tournament was most teams that defeated the underdogs would then go on to get eliminated, upset as underdogs, would go on to get eliminated very next time, right? B&E against Na'Vi, they get eliminated after defeating FaZe. And then you obviously think about, even to the playoffs, right? So, like, ENCE obviously loses to... I actually can't even remember who they were facing in the final hurdle there. Oh, it was MOUZ, of course. So ENCE loses to MOUZ after upsetting Vitality. You get MOUZ losing to Outsiders after upsetting Cloud9. Furia losing to Heroic after upsetting Na'Vi. Like, there was zero causal chains between, like, a team getting an upset victory and then going further in the tournament. They went one stop further at every time. So you couldn't even say that they were just outclassed because it was their day, or their tournament, rather. You couldn't say their day, but, like, it was definitely not something that lasted very long, right? And that's probably the biggest concern I have with the Rio major results. And now when we're looking at it in this sense, the promising angle here is that the World Final can be an opportunity for the other teams to prove that they still have it in them. OG is getting way more chances than really that I think they've earned. But if you're somebody who really likes the Dexter iteration of this lineup, I personally think Nexa is a bit fraudulent. You can at least look to this as saying you have yet another chance. Like, you've somehow managed to find your way into yet another chance to claim victory at a tier 1 event, or at least, like, get deep into it, right? Get a playoff berth, get something going. So hopefully they can do something there just to prove that they can be competitive, because they almost defeated Vitality in the 2 and 2 game and challenger stage. They almost got to, legend stage. There's a lot of almosts with this squad. They didn't almost really do anything at this event, conversely. So you don't know, was that just because the legends were a little bit awkward at Rio, but now they're firing back up, like you were saying? So that could very well be the case. Then we think about stuff like, obviously you go past OG, you look to, you were saying Na'Vi. We know that they're going to be swapping out SDY for, you don't actually call him Nipple, but we might as well call him that because I don't remember what you actually call him. That guy, the Academy player, apparently people are saying good things about him, but, like, who knows, right? He's completely unproven. And now you're giving him at the fall final. Like, this is one of the highest, the world final, right? This is one of the, maybe not the highest stake tournaments because we just passed the major, right? But it's supposed to be a high stake tournament. And maybe we could even touch on that a little bit later, is like how maybe it doesn't really feel like it's that much of a high stakes tournament, at least relative to the fall final, which, as we discussed, production on point, you get all the sounds, all the lift, all the hype. You bring the hype, you make all that, those narratives come true. And
storylines kind of marry up nicely with the area that you're in.
The main thing to get hyped about the world final for me is that we might see a resurgence in more legends, more teams that were supposed to be contenders for tier 1, top of the, creme de la creme. Like, we might see Vitality come back. This is their opportunity. We might see Outsiders cement themselves in the same way that maybe Heroic just did at this event, right? We saw FaZe Clan come back into their form to get to the point where they were almost 1 round away from clinching it in regulation on Mirage. It's like, okay, that could have happened, right? So FaZe Clan are still here. They could be back fully. And so that would be great if we could get more of these teams back on the level that they were supposed to be before the major. So Blast having these last 2 tournaments of the year is a nice little opportunity for a lot of these top dogs to get back on the wagon, so to speak. And that's probably the most interesting for me anyway aspect of this duo of tournaments to close out the year.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It definitely does feel like, Blast have maybe had a little bit of the short end of the stick in the sense that I guess you got to do your fall finals, but you also got to bear in mind that there's only 3 days left of fall, technically.
True.
So they've done it like right at the tail end. December, I would say for me, is when winter begins. So I'm sure they would have loved to, get it in like October. Then they've got a bit more time for people to let this one mull over. Then actually we have the major, and then they have their world finals. That would be the ideal one. But to have sort of 2 events back to back with similar, it's like, what's the point in this tournament, actually? Like this one that we've just had, it's like, a couple teams have a chance to qualify or whatever. But it's like, the stakes are much lower. The format's a little weird that you can, play teams a couple times or whatever, even though there's such a low amount of teams at the event. And then your next event, your world finals, the same amount of teams, So
Yeah.
it is, and that's one thing. And then obviously, as we've just mentioned, as is, sticks out quite obviously, it's very similar teams, not only the same amount. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that it is maybe a symptom of the ESL schedule and sort of pushing them out, only available for a few dates. I don't know. It's definitely a weird one for me, the way that these 2 events are sort of back to back. And yeah, it feels like this one's a prize pool opportunity. They get to use the Royal Arena. And yeah, you maybe get a couple of teams that can qualify, but the world final. But again, I definitely do feel like this Abu Dhabi, it could be really cool, it could be great, and it could be, like that sports or esports washing kind of continuing, and it's like maybe we'll see more events out in this neck of the woods, as it were. Or it could also just be a complete shambles, and then everyone's like totally worried for where the Paris major goes now, because it's like, oh well, they can do a good show in Lisbon, they can do a good show in Copenhagen, but
can they do a good show in a new event where they've never done an event before?
Exactly, right.
Although there's probably a difference between the infrastructure of Abu Dhabi and Paris, but I say that like a lot of these events that are going to be held in these, I don't know if you want to use the term developing country. I think Abu Dhabi is a little bit better off than that. Like UAE seems to be like a little bit more modernized, I guess you could say. And so like when you have the infrastructure and it's like, had the benefit, it's like the poison chalice of coming later. So, you're catching up, but you're also, your infrastructure is more new than like, an America or a Canada or one of these other, nations that maybe hasn't reinvested back into that. So when you think about it from that angle, like maybe it's actually going to be really solid. But it does indeed definitely feel a little bit rough, because now if you don't end the year on a high, this is the last impression you have before. I think there's one other Blast event before the Paris Major, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere close to the prestige of what a fall final or a world final kind of has implicit in the title of the event. It might be like a qualifier, like a Blast Groups or something, right? It's going to be on a lower tier, a lower echelon. And I don't even know if it's going to have much of a prize pool, right? Like it could even be one of those things that doesn't. I know they have like a spring final or whatever. I'm not even sure what they've confirmed for planning. I did just go and look. The interesting thing for me about this is that the world final is halfway through the month of December. So it's actually only in maybe 2.5 weeks from now. It's the 14th, starts on the 14th of December. So that's an interesting angle, because we don't have to wait that long for these teams to get back to it. But yeah, definitely to your point, concerned about, first impressions in a UAE situation, right? Like what can you really do in that situation? So I will have to, think a little bit deeper about this, and hopefully we don't end up in a situation where it's bad. But yeah, like you're saying, there's a potential there. I just think it's like, it's a question mark, and we have to answer that question. But I am hopeful that at least the teams that we've seen at this event, many of whom are going to be in the next event, they will indeed be, firing on all cylinders if this event is anything to go by, right? So assuming they don't get jet lagged, assuming there's, all their equipment gets to the event with them, which actually wasn't the case in Rio for a few teams. Like, yeah, we should just see even more of the same, like, greatness in that sense. So I hope that is the case, and we can comfortably, we'll just have to see what happens. But At least the CS hopefully will be good, right? That's one of the only things you can rely on these days.
Yeah, and I mean a little bit true to form or whatever, right? In the sense that there's not been a big turnaround, and there won't be question marks in that way. You never know how a team's going to perform on the day or whatever, but we kind of you can maybe loosely place who's going to be top 4, who's going to be bottom 4, pretty easily, which always does help with the storylines. It's kind of interesting actually to go into that. I think where you can have a lot of Valorant. I think it feels like a game that suffers from this a little bit because there is such a big break in between events, in between at least big events. And I think there's, I don't know how it works, but I think it's kind of like if you're qualifying to these masters and to these champions, level events and stuff that roll around every 6 months or whatever it is, then you're kind of happy. Probably seeding and a little bit of money or whatever if you place better in the VCT league. But for me, because they roll around once every 6 months, and this might be changing, but so far, it's been a lot harder for them to build storylines because it's like, okay, here's the team that won 6 months ago when the meta and there was 3 less agents and all this stuff. Yep. So the game definitely affects it. But this team was, the hot stuff. Can they perform the same way? 2 days in, they're knocked out. And it's like, well, there goes, our general arch. We have to focus on the tournament and build storylines off of that, which, sometimes can be a bit difficult.
Well, it's been a long time for Worlds, for example, when the same team won back to back. As far as I know, I haven't admittedly followed it most recently, but the days of SKT winning every single event.
They were in the final this event.
Right, yeah. But even then, it would have been the first time in a long time that they got to the the level of excellence. So this is the problem when you have so many changes, so many balance updates, so many tweaks and overhauls and radical things. I mean, funnily enough, we even talked about this before going live. It's like when the developers don't necessarily have a clear vision of what the game should be, they're going to change shit and it's going to be radical. And you almost won't even be able to relate the current meta that develops from the update that just went in a month ago to something that happened the last time we had a world championship. And that is 100% going to happen with Valorant, right? So, and just the same way that it's happened with League, I think. So it's almost unavoidable, and we get it in a much more reserved manner. We get it in Counter-Strike where most recently, obviously the A1S meta hit after the grenade drops. And now that's an evolving story. We even call it the new economy from 2018 or whatever, right? So it's it's been a while. So yeah, that's just one of those things where I feel like a lot of people who are more familiar with CS might be shocked at what other people who watch esports and try to follow other esports like Valorant, even Dota to an extent where there's a lot of changes. It's you're just not getting the same level of consistency out of the stars because the game does change so radically. And thankfully in CS we don't have to worry about that. But also, like you were saying, I mean, it doesn't sound like Valorant has too many world championship caliber events where maybe we have too many that would be considered the same way. I don't know. I'm not sure where the cookie crumbles on that.
It's it's really kind of interesting, I think, because in obviously in esports we already have a thing to build on, to borrow from, and that's the world of conventional sports, right? So I think that sometimes TOs, developers, whatever, whoever's controlling the esport ultimately try and force a bit of an idea, force their outlook onto building the game, and the way that they want it and the way that it would make them money and all this kind of stuff. And I think that it's very tough because we don't have the clubs, or i.e. the teams have built their money, and that's where the split would come. So we can kind of paint these ideas of over performances and under performances and the way things should go based on how much money you're able to invest ultimately. Manchester City became a world-class football team. I know to some that might sound controversial, right? But they became a world-class football team because in 2011, 2010, whenever it was, they were bought out for lots of money, and they were able to inject cash into the team and build a good team. And they went from being a mid-table, maybe they can make a run, to they should be winning year on year. And I think that it's very curious, actually, because how big is this win for Heroic? I feel like Heroic is a smaller organization. FaZe Clan, meanwhile, is one of the biggest brands in esports.
Yeah.
So, you know, there is also that angle. I've just pulled my headphones out with my elbow. But there is also that angle as I smoothly multitask. There we go. The issue with these new headphones, man, they're good and they work. My old ones stopped working, but the default wire that they sent, one is really short and one is too long. Like, come on, guys. You know, can we not get
thread the needle on that one? Need a Goldilocks. No, you know what? It reminds me of, obviously, it wasn't at this event. It was at the Rio Major, but, you know, Cadian. Oh, I can't put back in.
yeah. But it's a little bit against...
At least... At least you haven't just smashed your face.
I mean, that's true. That is true. We had to throw that in somewhere. That Cadian,
I totally forgot that we should talk about the fact that, like, okay, so remember when I said, well, the chat won't remember because this was, well, it was before the show started, but Cadian obviously had crazy celebrations in Stockholm, and like I think it was Thorin who said something to the effect of, "What's going to happen when you actually win the event? You're celebrating for every fucking round like it was, you know, your mom's birthday or something." And now, you know, obviously they've actually won the event, and you know, somewhat predictably, he's like, you know, like shoulder leaping into his teammate and like, you know, bouncing off of the equipment. It's like, I mean,
he knocked the monitor over. He was maybe, you know, it's not a hop, skip and a jump to think that he might have broken something. You know, a little more clumsiness in his fall or whatever, and maybe he breaks something. Which, you know, whatever, he'd just pay for it. But it would be funny.
Oh, Cadian, you were so emotional after that win. I even see that you're crying. It's all right. It's actually because I'm in so much pain from smashing my face off the monitor. Like,
just hiding his hand behind his back, you know, as it's all bruised. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Cadian's always been a weird one in that sense. We could probably talk about Cadian for a little while. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, I remember in the final on the third map of Rio, they won the pistol. Right.
Well, it wouldn't have been the final because it was a 2-0, wasn't it? So I must be thinking about the second map.
Yeah, sorry. Like the last map, I think is what I'm in my head.
Oh yeah. Sure.
So they've kind of, you know, lost that first map a bit close or whatever, and it was Overpass, wasn't it? The second map, right? So that's a bit specific to put you on the spot with, but you know.
No, yeah, it was. Yeah.
Okay, cool. You know, the cogs are still working at least a little bit in my head. But yeah, so they win the pistol. And of course, it's the very first round, if you're unfamiliar with CSGO. And, you know, it's such a ridiculous. Anyway, they win the pistol, and Cadian does his, like, you know, and, like, veins popping. And I was like, they're going to lose this map. They're just going to lose the final 2-0 after he's done that. And they did. So, you know, it's like how far, I don't know, at least there's a consistency in it. I always have like mad respect for people that I'm playing against or whatever when they chat shit, even if it's like 10-0, you know, and they're just getting ruined and they still give it to you. You know what I mean? When you're like, what were you doing there? And they're like, you know, fuck your mother or whatever people say.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, when they're still kind of chatting a bit of shit or whatever, it's kind of funny. Even if you are getting wrecked. So I suppose it's the same thing, but the other way, where he's just always every win's a big one, you know. I get it, but it's definitely a hard emotional, you know, track to follow, I think. If he's not careful, it can probably, well, yeah, cause you to choke, as they have in the past, you know. I don't know, that it's like you win a big round, 5v3 with rifles, break their econ, they're on a force, you have that big celebration after winning the rifle round, because now it's like, oh yeah, cool, we should be able to string a few together. But then you get immediately reset. It's like, well, you've barely had, like, especially if it's in the first 30 seconds of that next round, you get deeg, and it's like, what do we do now?
You've had less than a minute after like, the celebration
to have all your adrenaline, like, you know, just drain out or whatever. So it might even just be biological in a sense that he's bloody got so many chemicals running through his brain.
That's really awkward timing, because I just put up a poll for Cadian's best nickname. And
the chemist.
Well, no, not quite. But there is a second option that does involve chemicals in brain. So
I don't know.
You might have to check the poll.
Oh, I see. I'm gonna vote for the other one.
Yeah, there you go. Clear the
Just,
air. Clear the air.
yeah.
Yeah. Hey,
But,
you tied it up as well.
Indeed, there you go. But yeah, I don't know, man. It definitely is. It's also kind of cool though because now, you know, there are so many different angles with stuff like that, and we definitely need more of it. You know what I mean? The fact that we can kind of sit here, we mentioned during the broadcast or whatever, right? That we were watching it together, and you know, it's like, oh, you've got all these things to say about Cadian, but what can anyone say about like Stown or Tessus or Shush or Yab? Pretty much everybody else. You've got their own history, and it's like, oh, you know, Yabi, there's that storyline of like, look how good he's playing in this final here and in front of his home crowd, and he's a new addition, he's a young kid, you know, whatever, very cool. But also, it's like, how do you build beyond that? Because we've got loads of stories like that. We've got Bit, we've got Munacy, we've got, you know, those are the young rookies. Look how they perform against the odds, you know, and prove all of us that they're even better than we could have ever imagined, you know.
It's like the entire Mouse squad sans Dexter
Yeah,
at this point too, you know?
Exactly,
like
exactly.
There's loads of them.
So what's the kind of thing to separate you out, to make you a more interesting piece? And, you know, Cadian has that in a sense, because he's very passionate, and then he's not too bad in the interviews either.
And I guess Stown is just that he's good at the game, but there's nothing really about
sure,
his
but
personality,
yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean?
It's like
he
what
stands out on performance.
Who are you as a person, not a player? I think is the thing, because the players like what's it like on the server? You know, what are your stats like? But the person angle is much more. Yeah, are they an entertaining person outside of the game? Could you see Cadian streaming or just being on the desk, even as he tried a bit in the past? You know, whatever.
Yeah, true.
And I think definitely so. And he gave a nice little interview there at the end. Bit of emotion. His mum came over. In front of the home crowd and all that kind of stuff. So, and it is cool to see. You can't necessarily knock the hardship that this guy's gone through, and now it seems we're still, you know, give it to next major, let's say, but it seems like things are starting to come together, and his look is turning up rosy, you know. So yeah, I can definitely get on board with that, and that's more storylines, there's more entertainment, and all that. So it's definitely something that I can get behind, and hopefully, yeah, maybe with him finding success or whatever, it'll show other players, younger players, that they can be themselves and also play a pretty good game at the same time, you know, and also win championships.
Yeah, I mean, this is their first big event trophy according to HLTV, and I think they won some tier 2
Pinnacle
maybe
Cup.
Not even a LAN. Yeah,
Pinnacle Cup.
Okay, it might have been the LAN
where
one.
I think they played big in the final, you know. So
yeah, right. That was after. Yeah. So,
I think Astralis were there, but
they were, yeah. But that was, Astralis in the last like 2 years has just been whack, anyways. So.
Yeah.
Except, funnily enough, when they're in front of a Danish crowd, that's so weird. It's so strange. So strange. But there was a lot. I actually didn't even comment on this earlier, but the crowd, I didn't know that their volume was not necessarily as high as I would have liked for, like, in terms of the at-home viewing experience. Felt they were a bit quiet, but they weren't terribly. They weren't cheating, as far as I could tell. So that was an improvement. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I don't know where because I'm really not sure how the mic up situation works. Whether they like have mics in the arena would be the first step, you would imagine. Yeah. And then I don't know if those same mics are being used. I think in this situation, what we've got is that it's like there's a mic in the arena that pumps the crowd noise also into the arena, as well as the game sound and the commentators. And then it kind of sounded like, because sometimes it sounded like the crowd was maybe a little bit delayed even behind the action. So I don't know if they're pulling, you know, from a separate set of speakers that only plays the crowd noise, or if they're pulling directly from those microphones. And I have a feeling that it's like they can't. Yeah, the chain, the way, I'm not an expert fully, but the way that the chain works is that it's easier to get mic into speaker and then mic up a speaker instead of using the same mic and then like splitting it off into arena and broadcast, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because you have to account for echoes or like the same noise being fed to multiple microphones.
Right.
There. So there's definitely some way to do it, but I'm not. Well, the weirdest thing is that this is their home event. Like, nothing is supposed to have a problem. You know what I mean? Like,
well, it might just
there was like one tech pause in the whole event that I remember. It was just in this final.
Yeah.
So it's like you're not ever really supposed to have any issues. You know what I mean? So. Unless Cadian starts celebrating, then you have problems. But, besides that, like, you should be fine and free and clear. So it is weird to me that they haven't bumped up the audio, but I don't know. I think it was at the very beginning of this event, and nobody will remember this anymore. But that like the in-game sound was super tinny. I don't know if you remember
Yeah,
this. This
yeah,
is
yeah.
during the studio matches, and like that was a case where I was super weirded out by that. I was like, because normally it's the opposite. It's like they took the whatever mixer they run everything through, and they like actually inverted it or something was going on there. So that was weird. But yeah, you know, it's just one of those things where you have to think about like how can we make the best show possible?
Oh,
I hope
well,
that they
yeah,
look
yeah.
into, building up the crowd noise in the future. No, that's another complete unknown, by the way, is like, what is the crowd going to be like in Abu Dhabi? You know what I mean? Like, nobody knows the answer to that one, I think.
Well, I
I mean,
mean,
maybe you can look to other events that have happened there,
yeah,
but
yeah. There's
no CS ones, right?
not really. And I know that, but I definitely know again in sport or whatever. I think there was a boxing, and this is it's conflating things a little bit. But there was I think it was Anthony Joshua versus Usyk. I'm not again the biggest fan, but I'll follow enough. I'll follow a big match or whatever. And that was in Jeddah, which is in Saudi Arabia. I think it was in Jeddah, but it was definitely Saudi Arabia. And that whole crowd was very quiet, let's say. And for a boxing match, generally those crowds are pretty rowdy. That might just be virtue, very simply, that there's not really much alcohol being drunk, if any at all. I'm tiptoeing over rules and laws because I'm not a full-on expert, but I know the general sort of gist of where it's at. So I think that there may well be a world in which it's a bit more tame, but I think they'll still get into it. There's been a few esports events out there. It might be, the boxing is massive, so it might also just come down to that it's like they've been told to be quiet or whatever. So yeah, I don't know that it'll be, but I definitely I just think that like we need to share ideas on little things like that, because I think that it might be logistic. There might be something that it's like, there's one set of mics for what the crowd hear, there's one set of mics for what the broadcast hear. Maybe that's how IEM Rio did it. Or whatever. I think that, and it's funny because DreamHack events, these small, few thousand people events from back in, we're talking 2017, 2018 and before, they always had really good crowd pickup, really good crowd sound, really well molded with the commentators, and even a little bit of bleed into like, we
Into
go
the cast,
from
right?
yeah, and we go from hearing just the commentators, then we'd hear commentators with a bit of crowd reaction, and then we'd hear like the raw arena sound, which is both, and then they were able to like move through kind of seamlessly. And I think that those people who worked at DreamHack, ESL or MTG, buy out DreamHack. Now it's all one thing. So hopefully you would imagine that those sound people are still working with ESL, and they perhaps go out to Rio and they figure it out, and let's get the mic guy on it, and it does just kind of come down to they need to get those people sharing their ideas. But are they going to do that? Because if it really comes down to the fucking tit for tat, I'm going to watch an ESL event or pay more attention because their crowd sounds are better than Blast. That kind of.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's unlikely to move the needle or whatever. But
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
But
I don't know.
it's
I
something
mean,
that they might try and hold on to as being, because this is something that it's, crowd. I think for us as well, and on this show, it is a thing that we've talked about a lot over the past few weeks because of the major and the cheating and the this, that, and the other, and then also the quality of it. But it was dampened by the fact that there was cheating going on. And then this event, it's like it doesn't really seem like there's any cheating, but it's we've come from all the crowd sound to a very flat kind of crowd sound. And again, I think that we've established pretty early on into this podcast that, we're fans of like constant improvement, right? And not just being like, well, it's good crowd. It was okay crowd sound at Blast. At least they had some. Sure, could be worse.
Yeah.
Could be worse.
Yeah,
but
could be outsiders versus
well,
Mouse.
exactly.
Could be.
No,
yeah.
but
I
there's
mean,
still
to be
room
fair, like
to get better.
Yeah, there is room for improvement, and I mean, there is like the angle you can take, which is, what if you just never see any improvement? Like, where's the impetus to improve and to think about like, here's my better crowd sound idea or whatever, and you just have to wonder like, That probably isn't going to move the needle, and you get the viewers to watch the ads or whatever, and that's how you make your monetization, or you sell those numbers to sponsors and stuff. And so like you kind of get it anyway. People are going to tune in anyway. But I do think that there is, on like, at least for the crowd angle, you were talking about like the roar that happens at an elite level play when you do get that like really nice audio mix of like the raw arena sound with the commentators. Like when you get that, you do get a crazy amount of improvement on like what the vibe of the show really is. It feels way more powerful, and it's a more shareable moment. And I feel like if you wanted to use a cynical marketing angle, you would just say, dude, the amount of impressions we're gonna get when like everybody from games that aren't even CS are paying attention to like the crowd at this event, right? Like it was a bit, for better or worse, and I would say worse, it was a big talking point for I Am Rio, right? Like this major that we just went by, like it had a big element of the crowd was like talked about, and up until the playoffs, it was brilliant. A lot of people thought yeah, there were some games that were not as good, but you just expected it would continue heating up. And for the actual Brazilian crowd, like that's a smaller crowd in a smaller event, smaller venue. But it felt way better than actually what the playoff crowd audio sounded like. And so that's just one example of like it could have been mic'd better. It also like just optically looks worse when it's like there are 3 times as many seating, but maybe only 2 times as many people in the event. Like then there's just all these gaps. Like it looks from a viewer at home that there's like nothing there. And production didn't do a great job at masking that. Also, the event probably should have been played. There's loads of things that could have been improved. But at least for this event, like yeah, I do think a little bit of improvement, and maybe they'll have this at the World Final, maybe not. That would be like one thing I would like to see going from this event to the next one for Blast is, can we get a more hyped crowd? And it's just that I don't know what the results are going to be in the UAE, right? Like nobody seems to know what's going on there, and we'll just have to wait and see, right? We'll just have to find out, what the crowd is like, what the infrastructure is like, how well Blast can adapt to a new venue in a new location, which is just the same thing we were talking about earlier about what they need to do at Paris. So also classic banter, when a certain thing wins in a Twitch poll, it gets like this trophy that wiggles and like sparkles. And it's just like the idea that Cadian won a trophy, and then also Co-Cadian won the poll. And I just think that's amusing. Like something about that was just tickling the absurd comedy of my brain. So love that. Thank you, Twitch.
2 in 1 day. 2 in 1 day for the big man.
2 in 1 day, yeah. And maybe, who's to say which one is more important anyway, right?
That is true. I mean, until we get the trophy awards or whatever, we'll never really know which one is better. But yeah, I don't know. I think the scope is definitely there for like Abu Dhabi to be good, to be honest. I think that I guess a more targeted question would be like, do you feel like this actually makes Heroics like place in the top 10 or top 5 or whatever serious? Because for a long time, for me, I felt like they were the gatekeepers of the tier 1 echelon. It's like once you breeze past them because they choke to you, then you're a tier 1 team confirmed, and like obviously Outsiders kind of like did that right at the major. This event is like a weird spot for that theory, right? It's like if your theory is that Heroic are never going to do it when it matters, it mattered here. Like it was actually a lot of big stakes. It was with a home crowd on your side, admittedly, but it was against a very legendary roster. They're the winningest roster of the year. Like, yeah, they were coming off of a disappointment, but they looked almost like not impenetrable, but like you couldn't topple Faze. That's what it looked like for this event, right? Just like they're back to their winning ways, and the narrative was primed for them to take it. And Heroic had to battle that, and yes, they had help from the crowd, but Kerrigan also had help from the crowd. Like it wasn't just a one-sided affair. I think this event could actually mean a lot to this team, not just because they won on home soil, but also because they were able to prove that like they're not only beating weird second string teams at a scuffed major in order to get to the grand final. Like this one was a more legit run if you want to count just you don't count the pressure or the prestige of the major, but you count the teams that they actually did play against. It feels a bit more legit in that sense. So what do you think about Heroic in terms of their standing? Like, are they a legit tier 1 like world-class team now? Yeah, I think so. To be honest, I think that the timing of it has fallen into place for them. That there are a lot of teams like G2, maybe Na'Vi a little bit, maybe Vitality a little bit. They're just trying to patch holes, and the ship is kind of sinking a little bit and making these more drastic feeling moves, like sort of moving into English speaking or becoming an international lineup completely rather than 2 nationalities for Vitality. G2 just trying to, jam pack all these players together. JKS really, is he, has tested this level. He maybe, yeah, the best Australian player ever, but like, what's that really worth? Yada, yada, yada. Technically, Dexter's, made it a bit further. Or, well, just as far, right, I think, as Renegades did. So, weird situations. But I think Heroic, for me, much more calculated. This is what I mean about a smaller org as well, is you really got to make your pieces work. Because G2 can come in here and be like, let's throw all the price tags on and just get, Munacy's expensive, so therefore you must be good, right? But, that's not necessarily... And then you also have that extends to Munacy's expensive, so you must be good, so you must turn my team into a championship winning team. Which that's where you get a little bit like... that might be taking the logic too far to its extreme. Is that Munacy is not going to help you win championships. I think there's something... Or, well, he will help you, but he's not going to win them for you, I guess. Whereas Heroic, it's like it's a much more calculated, more kind of thought out. Yabi, of all the roster moves, felt like it was the one that made the most sense, right? You've got this young guy. He fills in as a little bit of a role player. He's going to take some time to get comfortable, but I'm sure they'll realize from chatting to him as well that, he's super sound. He's in the right mindset. And then you replace him for Refresh, who's a player that has never really broken through his ceiling. He's now like a journeyman player. He's not necessarily like an up and comer anymore, right? As he may have been prior to COVID, even, you could say. I mean, he's
a little bit more tried and true. I mean, the Refresh move was criticized a bit when he was taken out, just because of all the clutches and, I mean,
I guess, but that's a difficult one to fill. But you can change maybe your makeup. Maybe you can build a player into a clutcher or whatever. But just in terms of sort of like the again, the raw numbers and then the buy-in. We talk about the buy-in a lot, and I think that is really, really important to, believe in an in-game leader's system and whatnot, especially, again, because we just have like a 5-person game. So all the little facets and whatnot of every little thing are very, very important, very, very, impactful. So, yeah, maybe, you lose a bit of your clutch power, but maybe you don't need to get into as many clutches because of what you're able to do with Yabi. Etc., etc. But I feel, to me, it sort of made the most sense in terms of a gamble move. Because look, let's not to rehash over old roster moves or whatever, but Munacy's a gamble, JKS is a gamble, Spinks is a gamble. All these big moves in the bigger teams and whatnot feel like gambles. Some die young, SDY, whatever, going to Na'Vi is the only one that feels like it's a stopgap move rather than. But there were very little in the whole roster mania. There were very little like legitimate kind of moves that it's like, I can see this really panning out. You've got Spinks comes from an untested, kind of area where they had a bit of time in the sun, but is that a fluke? Can he hit that level consistently? Is it good player, shit team? All this kind of stuff. But yeah, to sort of draw it back though, and to answer your question, I think that. For me, I think they are hitting like a bit of a world-class status now, just, I would say, solidly top 5. To be honest, there's still a little bit more work to be done before you start proving yourself beyond that, but I think they were in a position where we've seen where their ceiling can go sort of in the online era and what some of these individuals are capable of, but they had a mental block, when it came to these lands and when it comes to This is another thing as well, I think, with being in like esports or whatever. You can almost in a way choose not to just buy the paper, not to read the paper, to see what they're saying about you in the newspapers and things. But it's very, very difficult to avoid when people can like directly message you or whatever. It's very difficult to avoid that on your social medias and everything. So I'm sure that they started to believe a little bit that maybe we do have a problem with performing at LANs and
probably.
It does just, maybe it is, we are just cursed. Maybe we just, and this is something actually that I'm kind of remembering. I think they did mention in one of the interviews somewhere that they have changed sports psychology staff. So that might genuinely be something that's sort of helping them out as a squad, because obviously I think Cadian is pretty confident in his own ability or whatever, given
he
his,
certainly
his
talks the
reactions.
talk. Yeah.
But this is the thing as well. This is where it's at, and we had a bit of a conversation about myself and all that, where it's like you believe that you can do it.
Yeah.
And there, unfortunately, you have to. There's no way you can come into a position, roles plural that he has, and just kind of be like, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm not too bad. I'm decent at the game. Well, that's how you kind of always stay in this spot of like, what if, could have been a good team. They had
been somebody.
Yeah, exactly, right. But you do have to kind of believe, and now that he's getting a bit more of these pieces behind him that also believe and also can deliver stats as well, I think that we might see them, do some impressive stuff. I don't know. It's too early to say. And this is a great cop-out, but it's too early to say if they will be, the world-class team rather than just a world-class team. But
where do you rate them relative to the field that is going to be at the world final? Like if we had to place where Heroic go in the world final, which now has all the teams confirmed again, it's it's them. It's basically every team here except Fluxo is Outsiders and Nip is Vitality. So like it's almost identical situation, right? And I don't even, is it just straight? Okay, there's a group A and a group B. So it pretty much is the same thing as the fall final, as far as I can tell, with like 2 groups of 4. I'm not sure what the seeding will be, so that makes our shadowboxing a bit more difficult. But like, do you reckon they make playoffs here?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think in terms of, I think Vitality could maybe give them a really good solid run. That's also a team that they've not played for a long time, it feels like. Let me just fact check myself on that one.
Yeah, I don't think they met at the majors.
Yeah, definitely a team that they have not played for a long time. Just kind of having a quick scroll. I want to say they played at the RMR, I think, and Heroic won that. So, I don't know. I think that Vitality could be a team that give them a bit of a challenge. Yeah, definitely Zywoo, I think, can put away Cadian and everything on the AWPing role. But ultimately, I think they should make playoffs, and I think that, I don't know, it's a hard crop of teams, but I'd put them in the top 3.
Top 3, okay. So you think they'll make semis at the very least?
Sure, yeah, sure. I reckon in no particular order, but the hottest looking teams for me would be like Heroic, Vitality, Faze. I think that there's still too many issues with Na'Vi. We'll kind of go into them a little bit more. I think that Outsiders might hit us as our fluky team. I think that they could still place well, but I don't think that they're going to like win the thing,
Sure, yeah. I would agree with that, yeah.
And I think there's still a little bit of like, still a bit of figuring out now that, they won the major, they're top dog, quote unquote. I think the Outsiders, also play this, it's starting to become a style that's maybe catching on, but in their version of it, they play like a peculiar style, let's say. So that, and I think that can make them actually mentally kind of annoying to play against. It'd be really interesting to get.
They're like the top team in every pro player, they say, when they face Outsiders. They're so annoyed.
Yeah, exactly.
Style,
Because it's just like, oh, well, because you just have this added layer of like, right, we've got 2 kills, and are they just going to save? Or are they going to go for it? And then you've got this whole like indecision of like how your enemies are moving. They're so unpredictable. And then, you've just got Jame one time standing inside of a smoke, which is something that he just never does, or whatever, right?
Right. Yeah, they have an element of them that is very unpredictable.
Yeah,
and,
sure. And that just makes them annoying to play against. But
sure, yeah.
Yeah, I think that those would probably be my top 3 going into it. But it's actually...
It's interesting you put so much faith in Vitality. I mean, to an extent, like, people would call me crazy for putting faith in Faze after I am Rio. But I feel like Vitality gave us more sample size. Faze went out in the Legend stage 0-3. They didn't show us too much, which is damning in and of itself.
Also to fucking B&E. You know what I mean? Like, no offense to the boys, but like they won, hard fight, and then they just go out in the next game. It's like, and it's just kind of, they almost lost to like Gamer Legion in the RMR as well. I think the whole thing just felt really weird for them. Really weird for Faze, I should say, like rolling into this event. So,
Vitality lost to Gamer Legion, but it was a best of 1. So, you know.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Vitality did what FaZe almost did.
Surely you just have to say though, like, you know, unless the project is really truly failed, there's just no way that 2 events in a row, and now they don't have that excuse of like, I don't know who Gamer Legion are. I don't really know how.
Right.
You know, I've not played against Acor since he was on Mouse, and he was bad on Mouse, right? And now he's got a whole fresh style, and he's just, you know, kind of shitting on us. Well, I didn't prepare for that or whatever. I think that can be a genuine, well, maybe not a genuine, but that can be an argument that gets used.
Sure. Yeah.
Whereas coming into this event, it's like, these are the players, these are the teams that, you know, you should be watching week in, week out. You should be ready for. You should be scrimming pretty commonly, you know.
Yeah, this should be a low variance tournament.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to the fall finals that we just saw. I mean, the one thing that people are going to say is variant is that Heroic made it, especially if they were still doubting them after the fluke major. But I would say when you look at the bracket and how it showed up, like, you actually wouldn't expect some of these other teams, right? Like, well, I don't know. I mean, I was just thinking Na'Vi, but I think Na'Vi were on the NIP side, right? NIP eliminated them, so that wasn't even. They weren't even on that side of the bracket. So let me go and see once again. Fact check live on stream.
Well,
no, like when you look at the fall final, like the way that it bore out, it's just Heroic defeated G2. That was a close series. That was 2-1. And then they beat Liquid 2-1 as well. And so, like, I guess maybe when you factor that in, yeah, you would probably put them above. I would put them above G2 because I have zero faith in this Hooksy iteration of the lineup. I also would edge them out against Liquid. They obviously met in the major before the playoffs. Like, I think that might have been a best of 3 as well. I can just keep scrolling. But,
well, Vitality beat them in Pro League. Is that maybe what you're thinking? Or
No. I'm thinking Heroic over.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure they met to go into playoffs in the major. I just have to go and find them. But so either way, it's like, I think Heroic have shown that they are a better team, both stylistically and also head to head against both G2 and Liquid.
Yeah.
So going into this event, I think you would like, it makes sense, even though maybe people are thinking, whoa, this is weird. I'm not used to Heroic actually being able to win a trophy, which is true for me as well. But like, when you factor everything in, I feel like it kind of makes sense. So I would just say, yes, Heroic are probably like liable to make it to semis, like you're saying. And the pieces start to make more sense, but like, this should be a low variance tournament. This shouldn't be like Gamer Legion best of 1. You know what I mean? Like, this should be, you know, FaZe learning lessons from this event, going back to the drawing board, and then knocking Heroic out if they make it. Like, maybe they meet in semis this time around, and that's why their story ends, right? Like, you could conceivably see that. But yeah, it would be banging if we got like if our bracket looked like, you know, FaZe and Vitality on opposite sides of the bracket, and then maybe like you could do a FaZe Heroic semi versus a Vitality. I don't know. Maybe it's Outsiders. Maybe it's Liquid. Still don't think G2's going anywhere, you know, but like, besides home, I guess, right? Like, that's it. So I don't know. Like, the rest of this team, it's a deceptively top heavy tournament, I think, with FaZe, Heroic, and maybe Vitality. Which is weird to say that Heroic is on the top heavy, by the way. I'm still not going to be accustomed to that. But when you look at like the way that the event is supposed to unfold, I don't rate Outsiders to win the tournament, but they should be handily better than G2, Liquid, obviously OG, I think we're all universally expecting to go out in last place. And yeah, Na'Vi. So really it's like the top 4 teams probably are, you know, FaZe, Heroic, Outsiders, Vitality, in that order. That would be my order. I don't know if I would put Vitality above Outsiders yet. Yeah, but I've always just liked Outsiders more than a lot of other people have. Not in terms of watching them play, but in terms of how strong they are. I think they're much stronger than a lot of people maybe think. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I think it definitely opens an interesting argument there that you know, as you're talking through. I think that Heroic are probably like the most complete team at the moment. That doesn't. It feels like the roles fit in pretty well. Cadian's maybe the only one that's sometimes on the numbers, and because he's AWPing.
He did miss some sitters today, but like, you know, nerves and so on. I guess you can.
For sure. And I mean, again, with the celebrating and all that shit, he's probably so full of cortisol, like, it's unbelievable.
Sure.
So, yeah, but I just feel like there's too many gaps in sort of the other teams that are maybe in the bottom 4 there where it is just, I don't know that heroic ceiling is as high as a Na'Vi or a Faze or a G2 even, but they just have everyone on that right page at the moment, and it is kind of the perfect time because, as we've talked about many times, many episodes, many different events, whatever. I think we are in a flux. I think that we are in a flux. I think players like Niko are past their peak, and he also. There's one thing, like, biologically, mechanically, age-wise. I also think that in his head, he might just be like, you know what? I really am struggling to get myself back into this mentally. To have that same... Because it's like you might have, like, 90% of the drive that you had 3 years ago, but that 10% is obviously going to make all the difference, That it's like, oh, I might have gotten myself into the gym and done my practice routine twice in one day. I did it at the start of the day and the end of the day. Whereas now it's like he doesn't go to the gym so much anymore or whatever, like,
okay.
No offense to Niko, obviously.
Well,
not saying
he
needs to be going. Not saying he needs to be going to the gym. But
the gym in this case is deathmatch or whatever. Right?
Sure.
So I guess we haven't really that would be an interesting question. And the problem is that just by asking the question, it's almost like an insult and people will get defensive. But I would like to honestly know what the the practice hours are looking like for the G2 lineup, because that's a good way to think about like whether or not they've lost faith or whether or not they still believe, right? It's like it's really hard to motivate yourself to do all of the grueling, deathmatch practice, etc., for all of the team members, not just Niko, if there's not any faith in the IGL, right? And so I still think we've seen glimmers of excellence from Niko in this lineup, but it does feel like he's fallen off in terms of how consistently he's trying to put his team on his back. And I don't know if that's because he can't do it anymore, or if it's just because he's not being used too well anymore. Like, on the one hand, it does feel like he's given a lot of opportunity, especially on these T sides that we see from G2, where yes, he is still looking down banana sometimes in Inferno T side, right? Like, yes, he is still, looking around Con or whatever on Mirage, like some of his turf home territories in these maps. It's like you expect him to pop off because he's done it so many other times. And yeah, he hasn't really always done it, right? So there is a question as to how consistent that can look. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I almost just want G2 to hurry up and make the roster moves, but not sure if they will. There's rumors that Kassad are going in. That's basically been all but confirmed if people don't know. But I guess, maybe we'll have to still wait and see. There's rumors that, what is that going to change about it? It probably, spoiler, if Kassad is joining, probably doesn't mean Niko or Hunter are out, by the way. It's going to be the Serbian gang again, right? So they're going to be pretty tightly knit. But probably means Hooksy's out. Like, if Kassad comes in, it has to be like with the stipulation that you get this guy the fuck out of the roster.
Yeah,
just
sure.
like, if I don't know anything behind the scenes, but just judging by Kassad's takes and personality, I don't think he would be signing off on Hooksy continuing to collect a check. So probably just send him off and then find something else. But, there's obviously the content he did with Thorin recently where it was like a whole series. And one of them, he did specifically criticize the m0NESY move. Not because m0NESY was a bad pickup, but because like the money you paid was just ridiculous. And you could have like changed that up and structured it differently. I think with his business acumen, if you want to call it that, he will probably get G2 some useful moves that are going to be pretty nice. He's also got past experience with JKS for people who don't remember the Extreme Mum days, as well as obviously Renegades and so on. So yeah, you're going to see. Yeah, exactly. So you're going to see, the opportunity for Kassad to maybe activate some of these players. If he comes in, I believe it's under a general management role and not a coach role, which, maybe that's going to be different. I don't know how that's going to change, but I would say I would have a lot more faith in whatever G2 end up doing if Kassad is at the helm. So there is that. Like, I think a lot of people will put a lot of value in this guy and not for no reason. So hopefully he gets back on the, he's been on the analysis desk and he's been, offering value in that position, but I feel like he's going to do his best work when he's actually given the keys to a team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would really like to see that. in action, and that would be a G2 that we can start. Now we can start having conversations about maybe we can have 4 or 5 teams competing if Outsiders somehow manage to preserve their form, right? Then we and Heroic do as well. Then we have maybe a Vitality, G2, and FaZe clan all at the same time. And who knows what happens with Navi? Like maybe this nipple move does work out, but and I still don't know how to say his name, by the way. So maybe somebody in chat can tell me.
I don't know, man. Nip L?
Yeah. No, it's like you don't even pronounce it that way. I don't know how you do it. It's dumb. But I hope that.
Well,
Nip
I mean,
versus,
it's
like,
boom blue.
Think about
like,
nipple.
It's just a whole different language, like boomich.
Yeah,
like,
fair enough.
There's no way my mind's ever going to go there, you know.
Yeah. You just think boom blah, but it's not that. So it's not. I will say, thank goodness that. So if people who don't know, Navi have basically all but confirmed behind the scenes, but not really behind the scenes. That Nipple, the young academy player, will be replacing SDY for the world final that's coming up. Really good that NIP didn't win this tournament, because then we would have had NIP against Nipple. Like that matchup probably would have happened. And I'm glad that that's not the case, because we already had Nip Twist, if you guys remember the Swedish Twist. Like that was already a real reality we had to live through. So yeah, nice that we get spared yet another one, because it's just too low hanging fruit. I don't want people to have to cast like Saw Gaming for the Portuguese team that had like a player named Just on their roster, and it's like I already have to say that he's seen him. He did not see that play. Like I have to structure my sentences completely differently, because otherwise I'm going to say saw, which is like a common English word, and then I also can't say just. He did not just see that player, because that's a player on Saw. Oh, fuck my head. So like, I don't want casters to have to do that, but I also don't necessarily want it to just be like, you have to resist it's almost a different kind of power game. It's like you have to resist the urge to not say nipple.
Well, yeah,
not make a joke about
everyone's
it.
everyone's gonna get at you or whatever. You know what I mean? In a jovial way, where like if you're not taking the low hanging fruit, like come on, guy. Come on.
Yeah.
A 12.
Yeah, well, there's that. But there's also, if you do take it, then there's like another crowd of people that.
Oh, yeah. They're like,
you're going to say nipple again, bro.
Yeah,
like,
keep it professional, you know.
Yeah. So,
it's actually pronounced this way as well. That's the other thing. Where it's like, actually, you're also wrong. Yeah, to bring it back to like the G2 conversation, I just kind of wanted to throw in. Obviously, you know, it'd be very cool for Kassad if he gets in there, and you know, he was lovely when he came on and everything. So, wish him all the best with it, kind of thing. But also, I think it would be the best and maybe their last option or whatever. It's like we got to call in the big guy, you know, and get Kassad in there. On the Niko point though, I did just want to mention that I think. I do feel he's going to become a very, enigmatic kind of character as the game goes on, and as he retires, and if he never finds that sort of success, this might be the last chance. You know, if Kassad is coming in, that might be the last chance, because you get to a point, especially a player like Niko and the teams that he's been on, and the way that he's positioned as like, you know, the carry, not just a rifler, not just, you know, the best rifler on the team, not just the star player sort of second or third in, if you're looking at, you know, hardcore roles or even just entry fragging as he may fancy it. He's also the carry of a lot of his teams in the past, and especially getting to that major final and then they don't win. And then you get that as a competitor, you get that dangerous question in the back of your head that is, what if I'm not good enough? You know, and I think that a player like Niko, and we've heard a few things about conduct with teammates and moving people in and out of teams mainly is what I mean there. You know, I think that there is definitely a degree of cockiness, you know, and maybe bending into arrogance a little bit as well, which again, a lot of competitors are going to have because they are just better than, you know, 99.999% goes on forever. You know, there's millions of people that play this game, right? And it comes down to like the top 100 players or whatever, and you're in the conversation as being one of the best ones. So yeah, I think that, you know, this is a time really for Niko that it is a struggle. We talked a little bit about mentality when Thorin was on, about how, you know, the great players have their sort of first come up difficulty winning the first championship, and then they have almost like another difficult period where, you know, their sick partner or whatever. Like Navi's a great example right now, where Simple and that gang won the Stockholm Major. Since then they've lost Boomich. Since then Bit's been figured out a little bit, so he's not quite as effective. You know, he's not this super hot off the press surprise that no one was expecting. And so there is now, and obviously the world situation as well cannot be understated. So Simple is in a position where he needs to reinforce, figure out again, and, you know, overcome if he wants to cement himself as not just, you know, the greatest player of his generation, but of generations to come, right? And I think that Niko, unfortunately, is on the road where he is still after that first hurdle. And he has come damn close, not just once, but twice, actually, you know? So I think that it is really worth considering that this guy might just be at the end of his tether with this whole thing, or towards the end of it, let's say. And it's really difficult to quantify that, you know, as a metric, because I think you can easily say, well, it's not like he's giving up, but there's just not quite the same mental fortitude in 27-year-old Niko, or however old he is now, as compared to 23-year-old Niko, 24-year-old Niko back in the Boston Major, you know?
It is rough because when you think about it the way that you're breaking it down, it's like he has had a number of chances. He was in a number of major finals, like just crazy scenes that he doesn't get more looks in, right?
He's only 25, by the way, just to...
Yeah. I was about to go look.
So he's actually very young, even when they're at the Boston Major especially. But also, just to very quickly add on what you're saying there, major finals, there's a couple of, but just finals in general. The meme around G2 is that they can't fucking buy a final, you know? And it's been like 5 years and the bloody, or 4 years, whatever, and the French roster, Niko wasn't even on the team the last time that they won a major tournament. And yet, they have been in, you know, Kato finals twice and 2 major finals. And maybe a Cologne strewn in there as well. So
the last LAN Niko actually won was in 2019. There was the online event in 2020, IEM New York, Europe, because what are regions? And then, you know, that was it, right? So it's like, it's been a while for this guy before, since he's lifted some silver, as they say, you know, like,
it is as well. It's got to be so wild because we still talk about him like he is, you know, one of the best players to touch the game. But I
think he is too, but it's just like your point, as far as I understand your point right now, it's that Niko has fallen off, or G2 has fallen off enough that they can't even enable him to ascend to the right heights or whatever. And
right.
So now it's a situation where we need to figure out, is Niko still all the way in? I just think it's so hard to be motivated when you look to your, you know, left or right or whatever, and you see like, you know, check the scoreboard, like 1 in 13. You know, I mean, like there's going to be a certain base level of production that your teammates need to have, even if they are your IGL. And I just don't know. Like, I think maybe when they hit their stride for like a weekend, and m0NESY, well, it was a little bit longer than that. m0NESY was doing pretty well. The loose style of G2 was working well. Like, okay, then you can start to talk about like maybe there's motivation there. But, you know, like you mentioned Bit got figured out. Like maybe that's what's happening to m0NESY as well, slowly. And like Niko is a known quantity despite being very like superlative in many cases. And, you know, if he's not on a turbo heater, G2 really don't have a chance. Like the most they can hope for is to get blown out in a final by, you know, a FaZe clan, you know, or something like that. I say blown out. There was the best of 5 final. I believe it was the last Katowice. Where FaZe won 3-0 in a million overtimes, right? Yeah. So, like, okay, it was not exactly a blow up, but like that's what they can hope for, and that's just, and even that feels like it was so long ago, guys. That was back when Carlos was still in the team,
right. But it's also like with where this roster's at, it's almost just kind of come full circle, because you know you had the 21 G2 where they make a Kato, they make the major final. It's against Na'Vi in both of those as well, so you know you got to bear that in mind, that you're seeing some other guy just fucking, you know, get all the girls or whatever the Thorin analogy would be, you know, and as well you have this fact that it's like, okay, so we had one team that was like a ragtag bunch, didn't really have an AWPer, we had Amanek or whatever, you know, and they made a final, and now it's come back to this again where you're a team bit of a ragtag bunch. You know, you still got Hunter there, but everybody else is different. And it's still the same sort of expectation where it's like, you know, Kovac go kill seems to, you know, we've gone back to that. And now this time it's not really working. And maybe, you know, again, it's like Niko, if he's got this, it's a hard word to throw out there, but I think a little bit the sort of complex of the self and how, you know, instrumental he is to winning these games and to lifting these trophies. It surely has got to come back that it's like, well, maybe I'm not as good as I was then, or yeah.
Well, there's got to be a question asked, because this roster that made it to the Stockholm final, like that was off of the back of him having the biggest carry performance he could have had. And then also, like, you wouldn't expect that roster. A lot of teams were like, a lot of players, a lot of plebs were like, oh my God, why would you disband this roster?
Yeah,
like,
that's
no,
also
like that was the most you could have ever thought.
The dead
of,
team energy is also
absolutely.
You know,
yeah, they knew that changes were happening. Yeah. And so, but then, you know, okay, with Alexi B, you don't get to playoffs. Big disappointment. You can't even defend your, you know, back-to-back major grand final type vibe. You can't even do that because now you don't even make playoffs. You get blown up by Furia. And it's like, okay, that was at Antwerp. They weren't even at Rio, guys. Like, this is trending downwards. So people who think maybe, Scriv, you're off your rocker, Niko's still a great player. It's like, okay, I think he's still a great player. I think he still has the potential, but he has to show the world that in a more sustained environment. And it doesn't feel like they have the opportunity to do that with Hooksy at the helm. Even at this, you know, world final event with Blast, this is their really last chance saloon. I think Hooksy's already out of the roster, but even if he isn't, like, or even if he is, right, this is like, this needs to be a more promising result. They need to make playoffs at this event, guys. Like, this can't keep happening for a player as world class as Niko has been. And we should be able to believe in him a little bit more. It's just, I think it's just so hard to get motivated under this circumstance.
Yeah.
Apparently the team is on the record saying, you know, the Carlos stuff didn't really affect them. A lot of other people seem to buy that. I'm not sure if I buy that. Like, it's also hard to know if you, like, I don't know how instrumental he really was in the CS scene anyway. Like, I know he was much bigger on the league side. So maybe that is true that actually the CS was kind of insulated from that or whatever, but it still feels a bit wild. Like, they still did content and Carlos still made all the ruthless cuts and the crazy, like, put it this way. I think, you know, Hooksy's out if Carlos is still there. You know what I mean? Like, I think he's
yeah.
That's exactly, I think we're already looking at another IGL, you know,
because that guy,
so that's just one of those.
That's all as the line goes, is, you know, all that Carlos really cared about was winning. Right. And you never know. We might also, it's like, yeah, where's the G2 going at? Maybe, you know, we can get Kassad on a little bit in the future if he does pull off this move, and they can, because there's a world in which, you know, especially because they lost their fucking Valorant spot, that they're like, right, we're going to have to start running this a bit more like a business then, you know, to just survive out the rest of this year and then hopefully go for another spot when franchising opens back up, or even though it's not franchising, it's, you know, whatever.
Sure, yeah.
You know, got to be said there, the small text. But yeah, I think that it's got to affect you. Like, come on now, you know? Especially, again, with everything that sort of dominoes in a sense that Niko, in the past, has probably been able to go and get Carlos's ear and be like, listen, man, I, the star player carry, cannot perform with these pieces. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is, you know?
I don't know. I don't know if he can visit anybody and bend their ear in the same way.
And they probably, again, because fucking, you know, everyone forgets so quickly, but they lost like an easy, quick, like $2 million. And in the space of about 2 or 3 years, they lost about 10 on this Valorant spot. If everything is to be believed on projections, of course.
Well, for one, it's valued at least $1 million, maybe more, for just having the spot. If you believe that valuation, even in the short term, it is a considerable chunk of change that's gone for an industry that doesn't make a lot of money for team orgs.
But yeah,
right?
and I
like
think
that. So
there's still like, you know, kind of behind the scenes a little bit as well. I'm sure there will have been business repercussions. They might have had a sponsor pull on a deal or whatever. You know, so I don't think it will have just been the Valorant spot that's cost them cash.
Oh yeah, sure. It's a bit more far-reaching.
Yeah. But all the same, conjecture aside, I think that, you know, obviously the energy of the company has got to change a little bit, because they have to sort of lick their wounds, money-wise, brand-wise, all this sort of stuff. And then also, you know, Riot relationship-wise is the obvious one, because now it becomes... Because I think that's ultimately like running a big business like that, being a problem solver is just sort of about damage control in situations like this. So it's like, okay, we're not going to get this spot, but we've got to make sure we get the next one. We can't miss out on, you know, the next round of franchising or whatever. Especially in America, you know that they give the G2 spot in America, even though they had an EU-centric team, because the American market's going to be bigger for Valorant, probably. So, you know. But yeah, I definitely do feel, obviously, we've been on this point a little while, but that's sort of what we're here for, to be honest, you know,
Sure,
on an
yeah.
episode like this. Just feels good to, like, shore up our opinions for when we get the heavier hitting guests on or whatever. You know, I can come in with a take on Niko or whatever.
There you go. Yeah, you can listen when Kassad comes back on. I hope to hear you say, "Hey, by the way, Niko's washed and he needs to be cut." Can you cut him?
I mean, we'll see. I'll make sure there's maybe a few oceans between Kassad and me first, you know, so he can't make me put my money where my mouth is, you know.
Right.
But,
what you could say is you could say, listen, Kassad. I know you don't want to cut Niko, but can I ask if you can like maybe cut his salary?
Yeah, motivate him a little bit more. Or something. But yeah, I don't know. And
I have to get in, you know, you were talking about, you drew a lot of comparisons to Valorant today. So I just have to say a Valorante child game, anime profile picture and whatever the copy paste is.
Yeah, of course.
But, you know, just get it out.
It's totally true, but
it is. Listen, you were saying earlier while we were watching it, like CS is just the best esport as far as maybe even the best when you consider other genres, but definitely the best shooter. Like it's not. I don't even think it's close. So I think like we talked about the meta changing all the time in Valorant, which I just know is a matter of course because it's a Riot game and they don't know what the fuck they're doing with any other game design. I won't say Valve does either. Like the change that we talked about with Yuumi last show is controversial, caused quite an uproar, caused quite a stir with the whole op stuff. Some people protesting Anubis, whatever.
Bro, the skyboxes on Anubis, crazy.
What happened?
There's just no skyboxes really.
Oh yeah, super open, you know. And
when it was like they maybe had a bit of an energy to move away from like spawn based smoking and stuff, you know.
Yeah, it did feel that way.
Very easy on the T side to thin choke point, smoke it off, and just run a little bit of chaos. So yeah, I definitely concur. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I think we could draw to a close here if you want, but I think the G2 there's just so much to unpack. I think Niko is such an interesting conundrum, you know, because we're starting to get a little bit of closure out of like where Cadian's at and everything, but Niko is still, like I say, Niko is still not exceeding, not even maybe living up to expectations, you know?
Oh yeah, well, to be fair, like he hasn't been back in a major final since Stockholm. He hasn't even back to a major since Antwerp. Like,
well, because
okay, when he tweeted out that he was watching, like, there was somebody, it wasn't even a tweet, somebody posted to Reddit a screenshot of his stream, and it was like Niko's stream, and the title is "Watching Major from Home!" exclamation point. It's like, bro, why the fuck is Niko not at the major? Like, for a second I was like, wait, why is he at home? And then I remembered, oh yeah, he got owned by gamers.
But even then, maybe he should just be there or whatever. I don't know.
Oh, but, yeah, fair.
You know,
well, you know, I don't know if you're not getting paid to go. to Brazil,
I guess.
I don't know if you're.
Be a weird kind of vibe. You know.
The weird vibe when you take a left when you should have taken a right.
But I definitely feel like, you know, Niko. I don't know, because in terms of like ability, I think if everybody played rifles, let's say, I think no one would be able to match him. Not even like a simple, just on the mechanical level. And to be fair, the mechanical consistency. But obviously, there's a lot more to the game than just that. And maybe, it comes down to like being difficult to work with as well.
We might actually see a little bit of this isn't a direct buff, but with the ops getting cut in half with their spams, like we might actually see teams go for rifles.
Maybe I'll be wrong.
Especially
maybe
maybe
Niko resurgence. Maybe Niko takes over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like G2, especially now, would be a great team to get one of those fucking Amazon style behind the scenes fly on the wall documentary things, you know.
I would love to know
unseen.
What's going on. Yeah.
But I don't know. Unless you come in with a big check, I don't think they're going to give you that behind the scenes access for nothing, you know, or for very little. You need to come in with like loads of money, which I don't have any of. So, you know, maybe a few years off, unfortunately.
Yeah. Listen, let me get my fundraiser going for my stuff, and then, you know, once we get all that, maybe I can pipe a few grand over to, hey, not Carlos, can you give me access to, you know?
Yeah, indeed.
Got any potatoes? No.
Something like that. Yeah, something like that.
Workshop that.
Yeah, well, you know. He's also, I mean, just gone. Just don't know where that guy. I think he might be coming back. Actually, I think.
Oh really?
The bald potato.
That's a good prediction.
Fighting. I think he's fighting Jake Paul soon. So that seems to be
Carlos?
what they're... No. The bald man. Okay. The bald man.
Bald man.
Bald
dude, the
man.
the bald fraud, perhaps.
Yeah, well,
you know what's really funny?
We'll see.
Back,
it depends how he does against Jake
Twitter?
Paul. Yes.
Okay, fair.
Yes. Elon Musk, bastion of free speech, so long as it's not against him, has indeed.
There it is.
Yeah.
And if you want to test that
hopefully
theory,
Elon. Yeah, I was going to say, hopefully Elon's not watching this. Actually, down below, you can find my socials if you want to suspend me or whatever for.
Yeah.
Crossing some line that you keep moving. But yeah, so I don't know. I feel like that's a good spot to end on. You know, we've got a little bit of banter towards the end. We've been going for about an hour and a half or so. That's what my timer says, sir. I don't know about your end. But yeah, it's nice, and I think. It's fun, isn't it? It's a good conversation, and it's a good like practice like I say, to just sort of shore up the takes for future.
And you know what? Like it's a nice little communal feeling to get everybody in after a big event. So maybe even if scheduling doesn't work out, hopefully we'll be on for the world final. Little post show as well, depending on how things work out, right? So
yeah,
could happen.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Why not, right? And that might be our scope to pull in the sort of roundtable-y type things if we just have it as a bit of a super fresh, super loose talk about, and then maybe we can start doing topic-based shows. And I pulled my fucking headphones out again. Oh my god, dude.
There it is.
I can't even. I have to be very conscious of like if my leg is catching it a little bit, if it's getting in on the arm, and then I just do a bit of a sharp turn. I like to move around, so. Maybe I need to endeavor about finding a new, longer wire.
And then I said that wasn't my headphone cable. That was my dick.
I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that.
And you're supposed to hard cut and then like
fade
straight into VOO. I don't know.
So. Yeah.
Nobody's even gonna get that because you didn't include it in the freaking episode.
But. What the Shaq?
That's the Shaq joke, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like the shittest joke of all time.
Right. I think we just have to leave that. It's like if you want context, guys, if you made it this far towards the end, just go look it up yourself.
I'm not of searches.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sitting here explaining the joke and then
You're
not delivering it all that well because I don't know it word for word. I don't know, man. I just think that's such a funny angle where it's like you poorly deliver a joke or like, this is all the Norm Macdonald type shit, right? I think he probably
big fan
was the funniest man ever, to be honest. God rest his soul or whatever. But yeah, there's that angle. Then there's like super long and conflated jokes. That
that's
essentially
kind of the
don't
same
have
thing.
Very much payoff.
Yeah.
That's true.
There's an element where they're similar for sure.
Yeah. And then I think that telling like a bad or like a simple joke, you know what I mean? That it's very clear what the setup is, very clear what the punchline, you really don't have to do much thing. And then like explaining why that's funny, because it's like, it's just, I don't know, anything kind of anti-humor, I think is an instant banger. Maybe this episode will be an instant banger, but I think that will draw us to our close. Once again, always good fun having you on, Pr0nogo or whatever. That's usually what I say at the close out of the show.
Yeah, usually to the guest.
To the guest, right? So now I just feel out of place. I just feel in the headlights. You know what I mean? But no. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. If you watch live, maybe I'll do a little plug here. If you made it to the end, obviously you must be a fan of the show. So we also do these live, and I guess when we have like a bit of a looser episode, maybe we can try and start to incorporate some chat questions or whatever, or get you guys to send some in beforehand. Could make for some interesting content. Maybe further down the line we'll get one of you on, but no promises.
Call-ins could happen.
Yeah, we'll see. But nonetheless, thank you very much for watching, everybody. This has once again been the Off Angle, and we'll catch you again next week.
You're gonna love this video right here. You're gonna love it. Check it out right now.